And welcome everybody to our little session on the photo-inspired templates. These are a great approach if you are doing double pages, if you're doing single pages, if you just want to showcase a lot of photos on a page. This is the third in the series, so the first series are old now. If you go to my store over at Scraps and you go to the value packs, here you'll be able to find some of the first photo-inspired series. Then we went into, and those were mainly single templates that I bundled up. And then we had the second series, which mostly have been delivered in the pack format, which is essentially 12 templates or 6 double page spreads. So you can kind of mix and match them as you prefer. They are designed to kind of coordinate. And now we've entered into the third series. So we are on 3E. And so they just keep kind of getting better and better. Obviously, as digital scrapbookers, as artists, you guys are progressing. As a designer, I too am getting better at the craft. So you'll see that they have a number of different features to them. I'm going to open up one of these templates, but you get 12 in a set. I have actually taken these out of the folders in which they're delivered. So they're delivered in 3 different folders. I've taken them out and put them all together because you can just see them better and access them better. We package them up in multiple folders just to make the downloads a little bit easier. So you'll unzip them and then you can kind of consolidate them into a single folder, as I have done here. I've got a couple of extra folders up here. This is really just for teaching purposes. I prepared a bunch of different layouts. So I want to show you the way I look at these templates. I want to show you 3 different ways or 4 different ways of using them. So here's version 1, version 2, version 3, and version 4. And then I also just want to show you just some of the features of these different templates. So let's get started. I'm going to use the ones that I actually, not necessarily in order here, 1 and 2 are designed to go together, 3 and 4 are designed to go together, and those were the templates, or the templates that I use. I actually ended up using number 4, and we're just going to deal with a single page spread today. So as I go and open up one of these templates, this is the other side to the template that we're using. You can see that they come in all these different layers, and all of the layers are framed. Now, sometimes it's easier to group these layers, and you can do this by selecting the layers. So say, for example, you want to group all the frame layers, then you can select all of those layers. So you can hold down, select a layer, hold down the shift button, and then select the other layer to select all of those frame layers. And then you can kind of click on this group icon down here at the bottom of the layers panel. You can also go to layer, group layers. And this can sometimes make it a little bit easier to navigate these templates and sort of see them, the different options that you have available to you with that. So I don't typically group layers and templates because some of you are using versions of Photoshop and Photoshop Elements that don't support groups. And so it's just a huge customer service nightmare for me because people can't access the layers. But if you want to put them in groups, it can sometimes be helpful. So this is kind of the way I see these different templates. If I turn these off, you have obviously the foundational layer, which is the layer in the background here. And this is typically where you're going to place your digital paper. So if you're using another designer's work, it could be a pattern paper. If you're using my art play palettes, it would be a solid paper, perhaps some transfers. It could even be an artsy paper. So that's going to go in your background here. And then we have what I call the mask layer. So to me, this is the mat. You can feature photos in these squares here, or you can add papers to them, or you can do a variety of digital art supplies in each one of these squares. So if I go ahead and open this up, you can see that there are some stitching layers here. I actually deliver these in multiple layers. So you have the holes of the stitching, then you actually have the shadow of the stitching, and then you have the stitching itself. So this allows you then to go and recolor the stitching. You can modify the opacity or the strength of the drop shadow depending on how dark that background is, or you can just feature the holes by themselves. So just different ways to customize those frames. I like, or the stitched frames. I like to keep them in with the mask layers. And then you have these individual mask layers, and these are clipping masks. And so what this means is that they're designed to be used with the clipping mask function in Adobe Photoshop. So if I go back to my photos folder here, you can see I have a number of different photos here. I'm working with some pictures I took when I visited the HMS Britannia when I was in Scotland last year. And so what you want to do is you want to select one of those mask layers, and then you're going to drag the photo on top of the mask layer. So you can see now, because I had this mask layer selected in the layers panel and I dragged the photo over the top, you can see that that photo was positioned directly above the mask layer. And this is done using the Move tool from the Tools panel. So just to kind of repeat that process, you select the Move tool from the Tools panel. You can also use the Auto Select option as well. If you have a number of layers and you're not sure where it is, if I have that Auto Select option checked and I click on it, you can see by clicking on it, it automatically selects that layer in the Layers panel. And then you're going to click down, hold down that left mouse button, drag, and then release that left mouse button. And then that photo is going to be deposited directly on top of that mask. And that's exactly what we want. And then with your transform controls, you can see I have the Move tool selected, the transform controls selected at the top here. If you're working in Photoshop Elements, you want to make sure you have that bounding box option checked at the bottom of your screen. It's going to do the same thing. The auto select option is also located at the bottom of your screen when you're using the Move tool. And then you're going to drag this photo in. You can see I can resize it, and so that it fits just over the edges of that mask layer. You're going to click on the check mark at the top of your screen in Photoshop, or on the bounding box if you're working in Photoshop Elements, to accept that transformation. And then you're going to go to Layer and Create Clipping Mask. And you'll notice next to that command, there are shortcut keys. So instead of going to Layer, Create Clipping Mask, you can also press Alt Control G if you're on a Windows. That would be Option Command G if you are working on a Mac or an Apple computer. I prefer to go to Layer, Create Clipping Mask. I find that I do use shortcuts more and more as time goes by, but I still like the, it's very relaxing to me to move my cursor around the different parts of the screen. So to me, it's a very enjoyable process. And I find that shortcuts, I'm messing around with my hands and I'm, it's just not as comfortable to me personally. So, and it also, I think it's helpful when I demonstrate that I can show you a little bit better. You can't see what I'm doing with my hands when I'm pressing shortcuts. So I like to show you the kind of the old school way of doing it. So you can see that when I clip that photo to that mask, we get this little indentation notifying us that we've now created this clipping set. So we have the mask layer, and then we have the clipped photo layer, which creates a clipping set. And you can see also too that that photo now conforms to the shape of the clipping mask. And you can do the same thing with digital art supplies. So now with the Move tool selected, the auto select option checked, I've now selected the next mask. I could also, if I wanted to, grab any of these other masks, but you want to make sure you have the mask to which you want to clip an image selected. And then now I'm going to just go into the Enigma collection. I'm going to access the Artplay palette Enigma. You could use any of the Artplay palettes. This is the most recent one and the one that I've been playing with. And then you can take one of these papers. So I'm going to go with artsy paper 1 here, drag it in. You can actually drag it if you're in Photoshop directly onto the canvas. If you're working in Photoshop Elements, you'll have to drag it into your workspace and then move it onto your canvas. Accept that transformation and then go to Layer, Create Clipping Mask, like that. And you can move around, because I have that auto select option checked, that when I click on this, it's going to move this around. I can resize this if I want to. I can rotate it, and you can see that it conforms to the shape of that mask. So that's how clipping masks work. And so this is your next layer. You have the option to use it as a mat. So you can add papers or digital designs to it, or you can add photos to it. The next layer is really the frames. And these frames are pretty cool. They've got some paper textures in them. I've also added this fun paper texture over the top that gives it just some really cool dimension. So the way that these work, I've got these all grouped together into a folder here. So here's the frame texture. You can see how that makes a difference. It looks quite flat. So again, the idea here is that you can recolor this texture. You can duplicate this texture to make it much more intense. You can modify the texture by reducing the opacity. You can also recolor the texture too. If you wanted it to have, you can see we've got quite a few blues here. If you wanted it to have a blue hue, you could go to Edit, Fill, ensure that you have that Preserve Transparency checked, and then go down to your color option. And this is going to bring up the color picker. I can go ahead and I can sample this dark blue, or maybe it's more of a dark purple. We'll just adjust that to make it more of a blue color here. So navy blue, click OK, and then click OK. And now you can see that that has converted to blue. You can also change the blending mode. I typically like multiply or linear burn, but you could go with color burn as well. Any of these darken blending modes in this section here are going to work really quite well with this particular template here, or with this particular frame. And then you've got the same thing on the top here. So we've got another paper texture here. You can see we've got this torn edge here. So I just left that kind of separate. Sometimes I make it part of the frame, but you could clip a paper to it if you wanted to. You could recolor it. I would just leave it standard if it was me. But you've got that torn frame edge. You've got the clipping masks here for the frames. And then we have this fun stroked frame here as well. So again, you could recolor that in the same way that you recolored that paper texture. So if I wanted to go to Edit, Fill, and then with that Preserve Transparency box checked, we'll keep the color the same. Oops, I got the wrong layer selected. Let's do that correctly. Edit, Fill with the Preserve Transparency box checked. And now you can see that this is a dark navy. If I zoomed in, you'd be able to see that. So these frames work in the same way. So the white is really the matte area of the frame. You've got the drop shadow. So again, you can change the blending mode. You can adjust the fill or the drop shadow to make those shadows darker. You can also change the color. So if you wanted them a brown, again, a navy blue, if you had a lot of blues on your page, then you can go ahead and do that. So again, they're very kind of layered approaches so that you have maximum customization. So the idea here is you won't be able to use the auto selection up here, because if you do, it's probably going to select that frame texture. So you want to manually select that frame mask layer. And I'm just going to use the same photo just for ease of use. And then I'm going to drag that photo over onto that layer. And you can see that it has been deposited directly above that mask layer. And then this time I'm going to go to Layer, Create Clipping Mask, and you can see that it works in exactly the same way, clips to that layer. And then you can resize it and move it around to get it to fit how you want it to go. And then of course you can change, I'm going to change the paper layer here to linear burn. and then we'll duplicate that. So it might be that you need to duplicate these just a couple of times, depending on how dark your photo is, in order to get that paper texture to work how you want it to. And you do the same thing over the top here. You can grab one of those mask layers, move a photo over the top, go to layer, create clipping mask, and it's going to work in exactly the same way. And again, you can duplicate that layer to make it darker, and that's going to show up that texture through your photos. So you have your foundation layer, you have your matte layer, and then you have your frame layers. So that's where we are right now. And then you kind of come to the embellishment layers. So typically you can have embellishments below your frames. And these are the embellishments that I've included with these photo-inspired templates. In fact, that's the big difference between Series 3 and Series 2, is that I have started to include a lot more embellishments with these templates and include a lot more sort of detailed features, such as these torn frames and the textures that go over the top here. So I'm actually just going to turn off, or at least turn down, this texture. It's a little much. So maybe like that. So you can see how you can adjust that. So we have this nice doily element that goes underneath, and then you also have elements that go on top. So we have staples, we have urban threads, and then we have, again, these another embellishment here. This happens to be a little ribbon. And so I consider the embellishments the fourth phase of these templates. And then the fifth phase, the fifth step, is to add your journaling. And that's really just a matter of selecting the type tool from the tools panel. You can see that the type box already exists. It basically says add your journaling or text in this box. Select this text with the type tool from the tools panel, and then either start typing or copying, paste your text as preferred. So I like to select that text and then go in there and just write what I want to write. And if you decide you want to adjust that text box, that's totally cool. You can do that. I'm just going to click on that check mark to accept that text that I've entered. You want to physically, with that type tool selected, click in the text box and then move this text. And you can see that that text wraps around. So if you wanted to move that text box and put it in a different spot, so say we want to move it up here into this space, then we would have to adjust that text box like this to make it fit into that space. And then it's just a matter, you can see how that text wraps around quite nicely when I do that. So those are the 5 phases of the photo-inspired template. I am going to go ahead and close these out. Also, too, just before I go ahead and move away from this, you can also, as well, if you want to, move the different elements. So it looks like we have, so for example, if I wanted to move this element down here or here, I could move this around. I can take this and I can rotate it, and I can move it in a different location. You can also as well move the staples around as well. So obviously you have the flexibility to do that, just is worth saying there. So I'm going to go ahead and just open up the templates. I moved my templates in here so I'd have access to them, and open up the layouts that I have prepared here. So I had to actually split these into 2 different PSD files. I was hoping to be able to show them all in one PSD, but Photoshop wouldn't let me do it because the file was over 2 gigs or something. It was crazy big, just because I had so many layouts in one particular PSD file. So this is the first approach to using the templates, is where you can really take a very photo-inspired sort of approach, where you are essentially adding photos to all of the different layers. So if I go ahead and turn this off, you can see we have the background here. For my mat, I have added in a light paper here. You could make it a dark paper if you wanted to, just totally depends. But I've just added in a solid paper, typically nine times out of 10, that's what I'm going to do here. And then you can see that I have added all photos into that matte area. So let's go ahead and turn off some of these layers. There's quite a lot of them, and I haven't done groups within groups here, but you'll see okay, so we have that one, this one, and this one. So here we have 4 different mask layers. These are the mask layers, and I have clipped photos. I've actually clipped 2 different types of photos to this one. So we have this mask, and I added this photo, then I decided this photo, then I decided no, this photo. So 3 different photo options there. I added this photo here, I had another photo down here, and another photo here. So that takes care of the mask layer. And then we have our first frame here that I've added. And then we have another frame here. I guess I used a different template for this one, but that's fine. So you can see that's the second frame. Again, you could duplicate that texture if you wanted to and make it stronger. You can see how that works. And then we have another frame over the top here, which I have then added another photo into. So notice how I've placed this photo behind with the details showing in the visible portion of the frame. And then we have the elements. So we have a urban threads here. We have staples. What else do we have? We have our text box where you can add your journaling. I think I actually moved the text box. The text box is typically over one of these areas, but because I have a lot of all the photos in here, I moved the text box over the frame here. And then there's the button. These are all things that come with the template, and then the layered paper in the background here. So that brings in quite a nice effect and allows you to showcase a lot of photos. In this case, I've been able to show 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. And again, in the background here, my intention was to show this picture of a young Prince Philip and Queen Elizabeth in the image. It wasn't necessarily to show the car underneath. I mean, you could do, and again, you could also modify this template. You could remove these frames, turn them off, so that you just have the areas showing that you want to have visible. So in this case, if I wanted to have that visible, I could do, but certainly this approach doesn't really lend itself very well to being able to showcase all the photos. You can also move the frames. So if I wanted to move this over, because you can see there's a reflection here, I don't know if that's me or someone else, but you could move this here so that you could show more of the car. So it's very flexible in being able to move these frames around. If you do choose to move the frames, just be mindful you also need to move the staples as well. And you can do that by making a selection with the rectangular marquee tool, going to edit, cut, edit, paste, or you can use the shortcut commands if you want to, and then you can move that staple over back into position. So you can move those staples from their original location. So that's your option 1 there. Then we have this option 2, where I've taken a completely opposing approach, and I have just decided to add the, let me see, is it this one? That's the first one. This must be the second one. So where I have actually taken the foundation and I've just added artsy papers to that foundation. So I can go in here. Let's go ahead and turn off these layers and we'll bring them all back on again. So we have our background, our solid background, and then I have clipped papers to the 4 different masks. So instead of photos, we've got papers there, and then we can bring in our photo layers. So we have our frame, we have our second frame here, then we have our third frame over the top here, our urban threads, our staples, our text box. In this case, I had more room here to add a title because I'm not using the photos. So as you start removing photos from a template, you can start adding more of the digital art to fill in the space. You can see I've added the button there. There's another button that I added, this red one, just for a little bit of pop of color. I also added some of these multimedia magic sparkles. I added some of these stars in. I thought that that was a fun little touch. So those were kind of additional embellishments that I've added in throughout here. But yeah, so that's the second approach, where you take that second matte layer and you just layer it with digital art supplies instead of photos. And then the third option is to combine the two. So this is where you take that matte background and you do a combination of digital art supplies, or in this case, papers. You could also use the artsy cards. And then I've also added a couple of photos in there as well. So that's your sort of third option, where you can get a couple of extra photos in, but you can also use some digital art supplies. Now, the beauty of this approach is it obviously allows you to showcase more photos. Sometimes, depending on the type of photo here, you can see here, I actually really like this layout. It works really well, but I've also been very selective with my photos. I've made sure that my photos aren't super busy in all occasions. If you have like photos with lots of people or with lots of different colors, then perhaps this approach is going to be, not this one, this approach is going to be a bit different, is going to be easier. I guess I've got more layouts here. I've got another one. But if you have super busy photos, you're going to want to tone it down with more of the white space that exists in your artsy papers. The other option that you can take on is to, I have to open up the other layout for this. Like I said, I was unable to save them all in one PSD file because of all of the layers. So this is the second one. So you can take this further, where you have the photos clipped on there and you can apply blending modes. So notice now how we have exactly the same layout, but what I've done here is I've taken the photo and I've applied a blending mode to it. So in this case, select this to get the right layer. So here's the photo, and I've applied a color burn blending mode to the mask. And I tried this with lots of different options. Now, because I've applied the color burn blending mode to the mask layer, then it's going to apply that blending mode to all of those layers. If I change that blending mode back to normal here, then you can see that it changes how the different options look. So lots of different options. So you can combine, you're then adding an extra layer into this one. I really like how this one turned out down the bottom here. Again, I applied, there's a normal blending mode applied to the actual mask layer, but I have a paper layer underneath there. So when I apply the photo layer with a soft light blending mode, it's going to allow that paper layer to show through. So you can kind of get the best of both worlds, where you're showing the photo, but you're also showing some of the pages. So that's the fourth way of doing it. And then the final way of doing it, the fifth option here, forgot I had a fifth option, is to use an artsy paper. So in this case, I took the artsy paper number 5, which is one of the bonus papers that come with the complete collection of the Enigma collection. And I added that as my foundation, and I turned off all of those mask layers. So if you can see down here, I have the paper layer. I have to turn this off. Let's see. I have the paper layer over the top of the solid paper layer. When you place these paper layers, just make sure that the paper layer fully extends over the edges. I like to kind of just pull it over just a little bit just to make sure it's fully extended. And you're going to have to accept that transformation again. And then I turned off all of those matte layers. And so essentially what I'm doing is I'm only using the frame layers. I'm using the frame layers from the template. I'm adding them over an artsy paper, And because I'm using fewer photos, then I can add more visual interest. So in this case, I added a multimedia element from the Art Play Palette Enigma collection. I have that title here from the Art Play Palette Enigma collection, added that in, and it just gives a different look to the template. So there's 5 different ways of using that particular template. I added in these multimedia stars, and then multimedia magic sprinkles. And then we've got this button, which is from Art Play Palette Birthday. I like the red in there. So 5 different ways of using those templates. Of course, you can also use these templates in double page formats. You can take a new file. So instead of using the actual template, you can create a new canvas for your template. So in this case, I'm going to double the width of the template, which is 24, and then have a height of 12. You want to make sure you have a resolution of 300, and you want to set your inches. So let's add in our width of 24 inches with a height of 12. I actually have a preset here, so I don't typically have to do this. And then we've got a resolution of 300. And that really just makes sure that you have good print quality when you actually take these files to print. And that brings you up with a double page spread here. So what this means is that you can then place 2 of these templates side by side, so that if you like to do photo books, which I really do, and I teach a lot of that, then this is a great way to work with that. So you can go and you can bring in 2 of these templates. So let's go with that 1 and 2, because these 2 are actually designed to go together. You can mix and match them. They're really easy to sort of mix and match with one another to get them to work for you. And you're going to select that top layer with the Shift key held down. You're going to navigate all the way down to the bottom of the layers panel and select that background layer. Notice now how all of those layers are highlighted, and then with the Move tool from the Tools panel, you're going to click down, hold down that left mouse button, drag and release, and then you can either move this into position using your mouse, or if I just zoom out here, you can see with this bounding box selected, I can also use the arrow keys on my keyboard, and that allows me to nudge that perfectly into position. I'm going to go ahead and close that one out. And then what I, again, like to do is I like to group these. So I'm just going to group those by clicking on that group, and we can kind of call this either 1, or we can call it left if we want to do that. And then with this template, the coordinating template, we're going to bring that into our background. Select all the layers by holding down that Shift button, holding down the background, and then dragging that into position like that, and then nudging it in place. So now you have a double page spread, and then obviously you're going to want to save that as a PSD. So you can go ahead and save it as a PSD. In this case, I'm just going to call it test. And then that way you have it, and you can kind of bring it up, and you can add in your photos in the same way. So I think of these as a 5-layer process, where you have your foundational layers, you have your matte layers where the masks are, and then you have your frame layers, and then you have your embellishments kind of tucked behind the frames and on top of the frames, and then you have the journaling. So 5 different steps here. I'm going to go ahead and take a look at what the team have done, and then I will answer any questions that you have. So I got a couple of layouts here. I try and kind of group all of them together, but my team are awesome. They make so many pages. It's not possible always to grab them all, but I've got the majority of them here. This one is done by Anna. I find that these templates are really great for doing a series of photos. So if you have a series of similar photos, it's a really nice way to be able to showcase those. You can see how she has used various digital art supplies to populate her background layers, or her matte layers, those photo mask layers, and then she's primarily used the frames to showcase her photos. And this approach, obviously, because it's not super photo intensive, allows her to add a lot of embellishments. And she's taken the multimedia element from Enigma, and she's embellished it with a bunch of different elements from the other multimedia elements. So she's sort of mixed and matched. She's also taken some elements from the Art Play palette, and she's created a custom title here. This is a kind of a love script that I did quite a long time ago. So that's available in the store. And then this is part of the Enigma collection. This one is from Viv. I love how she has eliminated all of those mask layers. She's just used a number of different frames. She's taken those frames together. She's matted them with some of the elements that are available in the templates, but mostly added in her own slant. And then, of course, her custom title here. So another way to use those. I really like how also she has used, I think this is Viv. I like how it's Viv or Mikey. Not sure. It's Viv. So this one, I really like how she has taken the recent paper textures that were available, and she's used those to sort of frame those mask layers. That's another really fun way. Notice she's primarily used photos here, and the photos she's used are kind of a mix of photos that have more color, less color. This is quite monochrome, lots of white space, little white space. So she does a lovely job of using these templates. She does a great job of showcasing those. And then this one is by Michelle. So notice she's just only added 2 photos in here. She quite often will use her frames as places to add embellishment, to add journaling, to combine with groups of elements to create clusters. And I love how she's balanced that with this element at the top here. So you've got this sort of quad design going on, really pretty colors. I forget which one this is from. This is from the Art Play palette Lavalier, which was one of the classics from a couple of weeks ago. A great heritage layout here. I love how she's recolored all of the different papers blue. This one is by Susan. And again, she's done kind of a mix here. She's actually, it looks like she's blended a photo with some artistry. So using some custom masking techniques. She's made use of the multimedia element here to add in an additional photo. She's got some other fun images in here with the blue slant. It goes really well with the blue supplies of the Enigma collection. And another one here of a fun Christmas collection here. Some extractions, which we've got coming up next week. For those of you that are interested in learning how to do these extractions, we start that journey next week for Photoshop, the week after for Photoshop Elements, and we'll be working on that for the next few months as we get through the series of courses here. This, of course, is the Tannenbaum collection. And then again, another extraction. I think extractions work really, really well with these templates because you have the sort of the polarity of the traditional linear squares and rectangles with the more non-uniform lines that come with taking a background away from a photo. So Michelle does a lot of these, really, really fun page here, and different collection. She is using trying to see what these are. This is the everyday value pack. So this is the value pack that's currently available here. So love the banner, really fun photos combined with extractions. And again, taking that background layer here and blending photos into the background. A lovely little scenic one here from Kim, who's in the crowd. I love how it almost looks like she's extended 2 photos over this, or 1 photo over the same frame. It's actually 2 photos, but it looks like a continuous photo. That's another approach you can take, where you take the same photo, you clip it across multiple masks or frames. But again, a nice way of showcasing. She's added her photos to the frame. She's got artistry in the background, makes for a really clean layout. Diane, she works in a different format from the 12 by 12, and she likes to use these templates by essentially just mixing and matching the frames and moving those masks around to make them work for her preferred size. So just some really fun way to get lots of photos onto a page here. This is Mikey's page. This is the one I was confusing with Viv's page up here. Great extraction, out of bounds extraction here, where the tail comes out of the frame. And again, a variety of blending photos with background papers and adding those those images to the masks. I like how she's taken this photo and she's added it over multiple masks. She's also blended this photo with some of the artistry beneath. I like the orange features down at the bottom here that pulls in the shells and the lizard here, and another fun little vacation one here. Again, super simple, just lots of images. More non-uniform transfers used in the background here can also be a fun way to add to these different templates. This one is from Sylvia. Great way, again, she has blended some photos into the background masks and then showcased some of these great buildings. Looks like this might be Germany here. So, and also too, you can use the paper textures, you can use the overlays, the edge overlays. They can work really well with sort of containing the edges of those masks as well to frame your images. So another fun way to use those. Another one here, again, we're kind of sort of overlapping at this point, but you can see how you can kind of take these templates and start adding to what I have already shared. Another one by Viv here. I love how she places her elements to the side. Notice too in this one how she's resized that template. So you can also take the template. If I go ahead and just open this up real fast, because I believe this is the last image. If you take a template, you can also resize it. Now, when you're resizing it, I would not resize any of the elements. So what I would do here is I would select all of the layers by holding down that shift key, and then with the control or the command key in place, I think you could probably resize the lace, but I wouldn't resize the stitching or the staples. So if I uncheck the urban threads, maybe just uncheck this element here, and then we can bring in this template, probably undo the background too. So let's go ahead and uncheck this background layer. And then this allows us to bring that template in slightly and make it smaller. So if you wanted to have a larger background around the center, you could do that. Obviously, you have to reposition those staples, but that's another fun way to use those templates. So that brings me to the end of this presentation. Hopefully it's helpful in seeing some of the new features of the FotoInspired templates, how I like to use them. I've also showed you 5 different examples that I've created, and then also layouts from the design team. So any other questions, let me know. You can find me at anna@annaaspnesdesigns.com. If you have any requests of products that you'd like to see in use, then let me know, and I will go ahead and add that into the rotation. Okay, have a great day, and I can't wait to see what you do with these FotoInspired templates. We'll talk to you soon, everyone. Bye.